All right, let's talk some Arizona Cardinals for a second. They're an interesting team. I think, let's take a step back. Let's talk about last year for a second, because I was kind of lower on the Cardinals than most people were heading into the season. Thought that they were kind of like a fringe playoff team. I didn't think that they were going to be, the team that would start off so red hot like they did, no pun intended, with their color being red. For the Cardinals, I thought that, I was like, okay, I'm wrong. Clearly, this is a great team. They kind of eventually became that team I speculated they would be going into the season. And I think the way you view this is, how can we avoid that scenario happening again? What's ways we can improve upon that we had some flaws? Because they have to get better, and also they're losing a decent amount in free agency. So that's kind of what I find interesting about this team. So let's talk about that first. Let's talk about where they're at in terms of cap space and free agents. So here's the situation. Currently, the Cardinals cap space is negative $1 million, which alone isn't horrible. We see plenty of teams with much worse cap space situations than that. But the issue is just, you look at the sheer number of free agents that they have, and some quality ones as well. Like Chandler Jones, the numbers next to these guys, that's how many millions of dollars PFF is projecting they will get. So does Chandler Jones make $17 million a year? That's certainly possible. Edge rushers do get a lot. So if you want to sign him, which I'm assuming you do, then that's this real decision you have to make. Someone like a Christian Kirk or a Zach Ertz are guys who I think are, again, guys you want to keep on your roster if possible, but I also think that they're going to kind of sit back and say, okay, well, do we need to spend that much money on them is the question, and it's a fair question. And they're solid players, and they had key impacts on this team, so if they do let them walk, what do they do? And maybe you have to kind of pick and choose there. Guys like James Conner and Chase Edmonds, I think, spending $13 million to keep two halfbacks, I don't think that's a smart decision when you're already kind of against the salary cap for a second. And of course, the salary cap is more of a suggestion, but still, if you look all the way at the bottom, they would need $73 million to re-sign all these guys, meaning they'd have to clear $74 million total. That would be tied with the record for the most amount of money ever spent over the salary cap in terms of actual cash. So can be done, but that would, I don't know how many owners are willing to do that. Realistically, you might only have maybe 30 to 40 million, or even that's a little bit high in terms of what you can spend over the cap. Anyways, you also have, Robert Alford, who he played pretty well when he was on the field, but again, he's one of those guys who an extension of his last name becomes Robert Alford one healthy, because he struggled to stay on the field these past few years. So that's a question mark for sure, but for $5 million, it might be a risk worth taking. Max Williams, who I like, but you can't let him and Zach Ertz walk, right? Do you re-sign both of them? You would like to. Maybe you just say, let's go all in. Let's try to make this happen. I don't know. AJ Green, who you got a good, that was a good signing by you. A lot of people thought he was washed up. You got a quality player with him. Although, again, part of me does wonder a little bit of, do you maybe say, okay, that was a good job, let's not take that risk again, let's just try to see if we can do that again? Or do you just sit here and say, no, he knows our system now, another year, hopefully we won't have that fiasco we had at the back of the Green Bay end zone, let's get it going. I think that could be logical. And you have Colt McCoy, who I know, okay, Colt McCoy's not a star player by any means, but he still is a quality backup. So if you lose him, you have to replace him with somebody. Maybe you roll with Trace McSorley, I don't know, but you have to replace him with somebody. And as for players they could cut, this might be what they do, is they get rid of a couple of linemen, because there's kind of a couple of real interesting contracts here, specifically DJ Humphries and Justin Pugh. Here, Humphries being a tackle, Pugh being a guard. They're both solid players. I think that they're both kind of okay starters. Neither one are stars, but they're getting paid a lot. So do you say, listen, let's just cut these two guys and hopefully we can replace them with solid, maybe a little bit lower players that aren't getting paid that much, that clears up $25 million. Maybe we only spend $10 million on their, total on their replacements, and then we can sign, a Zach Ertz that we want to keep. There's a conversation there, at least. I don't know. That's an interesting decision that you could make if you want to. You also have Jordan Hicks, where, listen, you spent first-round picks in recent memory on linebackers, multiple ones with Xavier Collins and also obviously with Isaiah Simmons. So do you maybe just say, okay, listen, Jordan Hicks is good. Maybe we just trade him. I think a team would give you something for him because he's it's not like he's a bad player or anything. Maybe you make that decision. He had over 1,100 snaps last year, so he's someone who plays a lot for them. So I don't know if that's a move you make, but if you want to clear up some cap space, that might be a way you do this, is by saying, listen, let's go with the younger guys who are cheaper right now, and maybe we can get something back. It can work both ways. Get another younger guy in the draft who's cheaper. That's something I could see as it's a decision you can make. You also have Devin Kennard, who, again, solid player, but you could save $5 million by getting rid of him. So there's an option there for sure. Matt Prater, listen, if you're a kicker making over $3 million, you're going to end up at least on a list of options of guys you could consider getting rid of. $4 million for a kicker. That's, teams don't love to spend that much. I don't think it's a big deal to give him that much, but, he's on the table. You also have Jalen Thompson. I think for $3 million, getting a solid safety, a pretty good safety, I think you keep him. So maybe I shouldn't have even put that on the list. You could consider getting rid of him if you wanted to. I don't know. I probably keep him because he's been solid for him. Moving over here now. So this is where they ranked in each category according to PFF. I think it's always good to look at this stuff when we're talking about team building. Where were you at last year? Where can you improve upon? And what they were good at was passing. I mean, that was what they were best at. Kyler Murray is the key to this team. If this team is going to win a Super Bowl, it's going to be with Kyler Murray. I don't think you trade Kyler Murray. You keep Kyler Murray. That's just, to me, that seems obvious. The offensive line, it was fine. Again, not spectacular, but that's okay. You don't need a spectacular offensive line. As long as it's middle of the road, you'll be all right. And it had a good receiving core. Hopkins' injury definitely made them look worse towards the end of the year. So some people say, well, you got to figure out a way to build the depth. And that's true, but part of it, too, is well, let's just hope he doesn't get hurt next year and we're in a much better spot. I mean, how many people could legitimately say, how many teams could legitimately say that they lost their second most valuable player and still were, able to win a Super Bowl? Basically zero. Okay, the Rams lost Robert Woods, but other than that, it's going to be difficult. So you're going to look worse when you lose DeAndre Hopkins. That's just how it works. As for the running game, PFF wasn't as impressed with it. A lot of times teams played a lot of two safety deep coverages, so the scheme kind of allowed for guys to get more yards per carry than maybe they deserve. But I thought it was still better than 27th. But again, if you're losing your entire halfback room, then Kyler's the only guy who's going to gain stuff through just pure running there. Run defense also had some real bad moments. The overall grade wasn't abysmal, but definitely had some games where it just looked rough. Pass rush was good, but again, if you lose Chandler Jones here, it's not going to look as good, which you might lose. Although, especially if you lose him and Devin Kennard, okay, now you're looking like you're in a bit of a tough spot. So that's what's interesting about the Cardinals. Coverage started off strong, but really kind of fell off. Part of that was injuries down the stretch. So maybe you just try to get another guy in the room. That's another thing you could consider. So yeah, I think the Cardinals are in they're in an okay situation here. Again, you have the franchise quarterback who's not getting paid much right now, although maybe he wants to get paid more. So that, there's that weirdness going on with Kyler. But if we're just going to sit here and assume that Kyler does in fact end up playing for the Cardinals, they work it out, give him a deal, then for at least today, he's going to be cheap. And you have the resources to kind of build around him in a way. And I think that's what they probably will want to do. And quite frankly, I'm still I know everyone's going to probably say they need to build the trenches and that stuff. I'm kind of a believer in you can always use an extra receiver. You can always use an extra corner. So that's kind of where I would go. But I view this differently than a lot of other people view it. A lot of people are going to say, let's make the lines better. They're going to think I'm crazy for even suggesting getting rid of a couple offensive linemen. But again, if you want to view things differently, the Cardinals get rid of the ball pretty quickly. They don't need a super great offensive line. Kyler's time to throw is high, but that's largely due to him scrambling around and stuff like that. They do have a lot of screen passes and stuff like that built into their offense. So get some receivers who can continue to play. And they have quality receivers, but again, if you lose Christian Kirk and you lose Zach Ertz, maybe find someone to replace him. So, and they could use a corner. That's a big thing, I think. And then try to build the trenches the rest of the way. That's kind of what I would do. But what would you do? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on where the Cardinals are at? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.